Welcome back. It's time for our next panel discussion. In fact, we're keeping the customer at the center of all this. We're talking about driving customer experience strategies through technology. I do believe that at the workplace or at our, or for that matter, whatever we were doing, the way they've tried to use technology as a catalyst in order to enhance the experience, I think it's become more profound than ever. So let's bring on board our set of leaders and let them come together to deliberate around driving customer experience strategies through technology. Now, spearheading this panel discussion for us all, we have the very dynamic Mr. K.T. Prasad, Managing Director and RVP Sales, India and SAARC, Zendesk. In fact, he comes with more than 20 years of management experience in some of the top companies from the software and services industry. We also have with us our set of esteemed panelists joining us. First up, we have Mr. Krishnamurthy Rajesh, Head IT, ICRA Limited. He comes with more than 20 years of information technology experience at senior leadership roles in Indian and global environment, and he has expertise in strategizing and implementing different elements of technology and process from the inception to operation stage. We also have with us Mr. Linumon Thomas, Chief Digital Officer, Mars Wrigley, Asia and India, with over 15 years of pioneering success in delivering strategic results and leveraging technology to drive business growth. Mr. Thomas will be also joining us to share a comprehensive experience around this very important and a pertinent topic. We also have with us Ms. Ramya Sampathkumar, Chief Digital Officer, GMMCO Limited, who comes with more than 18 years of industry experience in digital transformation, business development, program and change management, business analysis, IT systems management across various industries and geographies. We also have with us Ms. Lekha Bajpai, Managing Director, Technology, Kantar, South Asia. In fact, a senior management professional with a passion of technology and analytics. She has been armed with more than 24 years of experience, having worked towards creating IT strategies and driving businesses to co-create products and innovative solutions. Well, that leaves me with our final panelists. We have with us Ms. Sudha Adarsh, Senior Director, Technology, Target. Over the course of her career spanning for 20 years, in fact, more than 20 years, she's consistently delivered excellent results in highly complex, deadline-driven environments, and a large part of her success lies in being able to create highly empowered teams and achieve phenomenally low attrition in a fiercely loyal team. So from the look of it, from what I see, we have some amazing set of thought leaders joining us this very second with regard to our panel discussion. So dear attendees, stay tuned because a power-packed panel is coming your way within the next few seconds. Here we go.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this power-packed panel. Like Kavya introduced, I've been privileged to have such an eminent panel in the conversation today, joining today. But before I do that, I want to reflect upon the last 18 months once. Year 2020, 2021, everything has changed. And we've been challenged on both personal and professional front. And I'm sure if all of us have a comfort that we are currently sitting at working from home, and some of you are in a hybrid environments, in many ways, which is convenient for you and the organization. And that's only made it possible because of the bright minds and the rigorous work of all the CIOs and the IT heads who are sitting today in the panel and also outside. It's not about today to drive CX or a customer experience. It's also equally important to take care of your employees. And there is an emergence of a new topic called employee experience, which is more prevalent today. Because your employees could be probably working from home for a long period of time. Like I come from a software company based out of US, and we've taken a call with an all in India that we all will work from home till it's absolutely safe to come back. And some of you would have had a hybrid environment, and that means the CIOs have played full to tackle cybersecurity, got to tackle about remote working tools, technologies. At the same time, the businesses would be pressing on, hey, let's deliver a great CX to our customers. It's very clear. And those customers and those customer expectations in the last 18 months have changed and changed very dramatically at a very rapid pace. Some of the trends that very clearly shows that customers today wanted to have a conversation with businesses. That means you as a business need to enable your customers to have a conversation that would come in form of multiple messages. Could start all the way from a simple communication on a website or a social media or on a telephone call or could be chat. It doesn't matter where they start, but they want to make sure that they have a conversation with you on multiple channels, and all should converge and solve the problem that customer wants. But second, it's also very clearly evident in the tough times and challenging times. Your customers are all going towards social messaging softwares like WhatsApp, which is more perceived to be more personal channel. So all the businesses are probably looking at WhatsApp and other social channels as a way of communicating to your customers. So messaging is on the rise. But I think I would call, with all that I said, I think we've arrived into what I call is an experience economy, because today and going forward, you could differentiate your competitors by the kind of experience that you deliver rather than really the products and catalogs that you have. So I think that's very clearly evident. And probably we will delve into the panel to see what they think about it. And second, very clearly, I want to set a context today is that we are arrived into digital first virtual everyday world. That means more often or not, maybe your organization is completely working remote, maybe you're completely at office, but there are certain section of customers and employees would work from home. So you got to really think about how do you deliver the digital experience first. With that, I want to start, inviting my panel, and I would start with you, Thomas. Like I said, it's been a tough year last year, but looks like the silver lining seems to be there's an increased digital adoption. In fact, there's a very common saying now, actually, what is driven the most digital transformation? And no doubt everybody knows the answer. It's COVID. Maybe that's a silver lining, because digital adoption is crushed from 3-5 years timeline perspective has come down to like few months. From a CX perspective, what are the key positives that you've seen in the last year or so?
Thanks, Katie, for that question. The pandemic has seen two huge spectrums of impact across industries and brands. So on one hand, you have CPGs like consumer healthcare products, pet nutrition products, logistics, supply chain, IT services, which has seen a huge growth over the last 1 year or so. And then on the other spectrum, you have hospitality, travel, etc., who had an adverse impact. So there's been a huge two sides of the same coin with the impact that we've had. I'll talk a little bit about Mars. We are close to 40 billion organization, present across 80 countries, and present across categories like food, pet nutrition, confectionery, drinks, wet health. And likewise, with what I mentioned, even within our category, pet nutrition, for instance, has been growing phenomenally with close to about 70-80% growth. Whereas our confectionery category has been feeling the heat, and it's primarily an impulse category. We've not had a lot of people visiting, a lot of retail stores, lockdown in various parts of the country, etc. So the brands have definitely felt the heat of it. But we've been very pragmatic in the way we've looked at it, and we've always been on a digital transformation journey, and we've accelerated a lot of these initiatives which we looked at would drive growth for us. If I were to look at the pandemic impact, I pretty much see there has been a huge consumer behavior shift which has happened, and these shifts could be multiple factors: geopolitical, economical, gender, but I classified under 3 pillars, which I see, which is comfort, how easy it is for a consumer customer to buy the product. It could be I more access it on my phone, my device, my tablet. The second is convenience. How easy it is for a consumer customer to have relevant information to make that purchase. So, it could be ingredient specification, it could be comparison of products, it could be knowledge about the product, how convenient it is to access that information. And lastly, customization. Every consumer customer is unique, and how do brands really appeal or service that uniqueness of the consumer customer? And then the second part of customization, of course, personalization, hyper personalization. Brands like Amazon, Spotify, Starbucks have really led the whole agenda and now are doing predictive personalization. So I truly believe that if you are a brand here to stay, and if you are an organization which are looking here to stay, all of your platforms, tech, etc., should be servicing this consumer behavior shift. So if you are either on board or you are somewhere in between on this journey to service this consumer behavior change, well, yes, it's good news for digital, because digital is going to drive most of the agenda around consumer behavior.
Oh, beautifully said. I love the 3 C's that you talked about it: comfort, convenience, and customization. I think it goes back to one of the philosophy that often spoken in CX world is that when a customer finds the 3 C's, I think they become more loyal to your brand. And when they become more loyal to you, that means they do more business. But the loyalty can very quickly turn into evangelism, where they bring in the family and friends to it. In the current world, in being in a digital first virtual everyday world, I think there's a high propensity people can go and post on a social media about the great service that they've received from you. They can influence that. So it's important to pivot on those 3 C's. Thank you, Thomas, for that brilliant 3 C's formula of success. Ramya, I want to bring you into the conversation. I think, we talked about pandemic, we talked about some of the convenience and stuff like that. In the last 18 months, there is very clearly seen agility played a very important role. When I say agility, it is about how you react to situation. Nobody really planned pandemic, and we all had a BCPs, business continuity plans, but we never factored in what we went through. Now, what I wanted to keenly find out is what's one way that your company has demonstrated, CX or customer experience agility in the last 18 months?
Yeah. Hi, Katie. Good afternoon, and thanks for the question. So there has been several examples of agility. We had to kind of hit the ground running when a lockdown was suddenly announced in early 2020. So there's been a lot of changes that we had to bring into to support the sales process, product support that we had to provide. So we are in the heavy equipment sector. So our customers are in the infrastructure space, and several of the projects were still running at that time in the energy and the mining sector. So it was upon GMMCO to ensure that the business continuity from our customers' perspective kind of continues. Those projects go on. So among several things that we did, since you asked for a specific example, the one that I could talk about, which was really a game changer from a product support perspective, is a remote assistance solution that we quickly deployed early on when the lockdown was announced. So this was in a very, very critical mining project where there was a lot of, repair and overhauling that had to be done to some of the heavy equipment before deploying it into the next project. And the way that, these projects run is they're extremely complex, right? It's, labor intensive, highly technical knowledge is needed. While there will be a lot of people on the site, typically at that point in time, some experts also will travel to the location in order to help, lending hand to the on-site engineers. But obviously, travel was not possible. Forget domestic travel; even the experts who were there internationally, we could not bring them in. But this very critical became a very, very critical business need that we had to kind of meet. So we very quickly identified, deployed a cloud-based remote assistance platform, which was enabled with a wearables device that the on-site engineers, could wear. And it kind of hit all the sweet spot in terms of functional and non-functional requirements it had to meet with respect to enabling collaboration in various aspects, right? And these were not things that a simple video conferencing tool could meet. So it required live streaming, image sharing, annotations, multi-party collaboration. And because these repairs kind of run into days and weeks, the data also had to be persisted on the platform. Tickets had to be created, routed, and it had to also work in areas where connectivity could be slightly spotty because some of these mining sites are remote in nature. It was a very, very successful implementation. We had zero schedule slippage on the entire project. Business was very happy because there was no impact to the bottom line. which was something we feared because we would have had increased expenses if the project was even halted for a few days, forget weeks and months, right? Or if we missed contractual obligations, that would also have an impact, commercially and reputation wise. But this solution helped us do that. But one point I do want to, kind of highlight here is this solution did not happen in just that 2 weeks, that it took to deploy it. It was part of a continuous focus that we had on innovation and investing in the art of the possible type of solutions, right? So very early on in 2019, we had identified that remote service was probably going to be the order of the day sometime in the future. But what happened is the pandemic accelerated that. But because we had done a study at that point in time where we did build versus buy decisions, we tried to evaluate technology platforms that were out there. We did a lot of variables-based evaluations, for safety, for effective integration with our enterprise systems, with cloud-based systems. Since the study was all done, we could go back to that library of knowledge, quickly pull it up, quickly choose the right solution. We did a quick 3-day testing / pilot as well, and we configured it and we rolled it out. And what has happened since then is it's one of those projects with zero change management as well, right? And what happened since then is we have now seen very interesting use cases of this particular platform that has been used in workshops where our customers tune in to see what is it that we are doing with their equipment. We have been able to, kind of lay out to them how we came up with the estimates that we came up with. We have been using this for training where we had needed hands-free, technology to talk about processes like contamination control that we are very well known for. So it has spawned several interesting use cases has come out of it. But I think that what is the takeaway for us was that constant focus on innovation and having that work stream as part of the digital practice helped bring about, this agility that was needed. Because business is agile and digital leaders have to be agile. And that has to come with a little bit of preparedness, a little bit of foresight, and a little bit of investment and betting on some technology trends which you think will make an impact in your business in the future.
Brilliant, Ramya. I was so tempted to ask you a follow-up question, but I would come back to you. I think you highlighted some of the great work that's been done. I think the few things that I've noted down when you're speaking, it's about do not stop thinking about what's next for you. Constantly think about how can we service our customers better. I think that seems to be the mantra that you adopted in GMMCO. Second, often perceived as heavy equipment, machineries, you need a lot of human intervention. Of course it requires, but also perceived that technology might not do a lot of disruption and efficiency. It looks like you brought that in, including wearables, sensors, and everything else that you talked about. It very interesting. I'll come back to you with a follow-up question, Ramya. Sudha, I want to bring you into the conversation. I think from a perspective of technology, I think today's the epicenter is driving CX with technology. And when we talk about technology in the world today, it's often two things that comes into everybody's mind: artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I'm sure it drives a great CX. Everybody knows it. What I would like to understand from you, how you see AI and ML driving not just customer experience, but also a very important aspect of both employee engagement and experience.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Good afternoon, all. Great question, Katie. I think that's all of us are in one way figuring it out. That's a short answer. The way Thomas was explaining in the beginning of the conversation, customer needs have drastically changed, right? So he talked about 3 pillars, mainly customers, and I'm starting with customer experience, okay? So they need quick answers, if you look at it, right? And AI in today's world makes it possible. And it has broadened these capabilities where you're able to give a personalized recommendations, right? If you look at retail space where Target is, you're able to make accurate decisions for purchases, right? And then you're able to kind of efficiently and kind of friendly service that you can provide, and a 24-bar support service that you're able to accomplish, right? And these are all possible with the current spread of what we are talking about on the AI space. Then we have the predictive recommendations again, where ML comes in and still learning to understand the model of predicting what the customer needs are, whether you're talking about purchases, you're talking about their thoughts, in every sense, right? So supporting the real time, the data and analysis and decision making has become one of the key things, right? And then finally, it's like recommendations, whether you're talking about products, you're talking about services, you're talking about information, in every sense that the three pillars that Thomas was talking about. So in my mind, if you ask me, AI is now starting to become the core. But to me, it is little few years away for all of us to understand its full potential and the use cases that it can accomplish. I will go back to the point where, the pandemic that has taught us, right? I still believe that, the core part of what we are all going to stay with is going to be the human interactions, clearly, right? In some way. So how is AI going to, work around that? So it has done what it needs to do in terms of providing the quick access, easy access, personalized recommendations, predicting everything. But how are you going to ensure the human interaction still as a core, right? Which is what as humans, as social animals, we always would like to do. So that is my thought. On the employee experience, Katie, what I would say is, again, pandemic has really shown us a great, I would say, a lesson that it is going to be critical for us to deliver, from our space, customer experience through employee experience. So unless you keep your employees really connected, give them what they need to do to perform their job better, you look at their productivity, ensure that they are connected. The digital transformation that we are seeing today has really helped us to do that. So it's kind of interconnected. Unless you have kept your employee experience better, they could have never been productive to keep your customer experience better, right? So that's the beauty of digital transformation. And I think it's AI in its space has started. I think it's a journey. And it's remained to be seen, what all impact it's going to do.
Absolutely. Happy employees, happy customers. I still remember that. I think in the year 1 or 2, when I started working several years ago, a couple of decades and 2.5 decades ago, my manager told me that, remember how I was asking him about the same thing. I think you mentioning about he ensured that every weekend, all the employees who really work hard being taken away for a drink or whatever. And I asked him, you don't need to do it. But I said, hey, if I can engage you and keep you motivated, and I'm sure you don't mind coming on a Saturday and Sunday to work. While you said it in a very, I went back and reflected upon, that's what we preach every day today. But second point that you made very importantly, I think, overall, there is an evolution of AI that you've seen happening. I think applicability into different use cases are being tried and tested. I think there are some use cases that are very prevalent that you could go out and use it. Sometimes we have seen somebody is over using it or abusing it a little bit and removing the human interaction, where it's driving a dissatisfaction of customers. Very beautiful point that you touched upon, Sudha. I'll come back to you with a further question on the same topic. But Rajesh, I want to draw you into the conversation now, especially considering you come from a organization. So I wanted to ask you an expert opinion on two things: regulators and BFSI industry. It's a cross-country industry, so I would want you to just go towards BFSI industry, which is often perceived as highly regulated. Why perceived? I think it is regulated industry. I think, let me put it that way. And the regulators have driven quite a bit of regulations, limitations, whatever you want to call it as. How would they reacted in the last 18 months and things that regulators allowed or brought changes in the last 16 months, if you can highlight them, please?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Good afternoon, all. And it's one of the very good and interesting question, because generally, whenever we talk about in terms of regulators or in terms of any guidelines, we always somewhere we have a notion saying that this is a some sort of activity which is stopping us to do sub certain things. So in a way, like if had it been a normal circumstances, normal scenario, we can very well understand, like, there is a guidelines, there's a framework, one organization has to adapt to it to move forward. But in last 18 months, what has happened is everything has changed. Now the normal, which we used to say it's a new, normal activity, is also abnormal to us. For an example, today in if you say that I am walking or I am jumping, people will say, listen, that's a common. But if someone says that, fine, I went to the moon and I jumped, I walked, there's a difference. So we are going towards that, and it is completely unforeseen, and which is not at all, predicted. We talked about BCPs, we talked about DR, we talked about continuity. Everything has gone out of the window. Now, when we talk about from a regulator perspective, the idea of any regulation or any compliance is to protect the environment and also to facilitate the business in a positive way. So similarly, when you talk about in terms of BFSI or financial industry, so these are the industry which is a data driven. It is like, if I say what is that, the commodity which I have, it is a, IP, it is a data. There is no hardcore commodity where someone can go buy it, feel it. It is everything is like in terms of data. So now how that interrelated data activity is happening, which is facilitating business to move forward, is something which is coming out as part of the directive coming in from, different regulators or different bodies. If you see, like we always talk about in terms of Indian context, just take one step back and see in globally what is happening. We have a GDPR in place. We have a data protection in place. We have a lot of other activities at place. So is that particular thing or is that particular rules are going to disable a business or enable? So that is something which we need to see. So from an Indian context, what I'm saying, what I would like to highlight or emphasize is, it is a policies or it is a compliance which needs to be put by the organization rather than depending upon a some sort of body who is going to tell what exactly you need to do. Because the more protected you are, better chance that you can expand, because the things are completely unforeseen, things are completely unknown to what is going to happen or what is happening. Take an example of in Indian context, when I talk about either a BFSI industry or any MSME industries or any such industries, where you are servicing the end customer, end client, and reaching to them to provide some sort of services or providing some sort of product. So in that case, one, the innovation is going to play a very vital role. And then when you're talking about the innovation, obviously there has to be a boundary which one need to keep in view, saying that how it needs to considered or how it needs to be impacted. For an example, like one of the thing which we are in our industry, I'm sure like all my fellow colleague as well as the panelists will also agree, like we talked about like how we protect the data. So one thing which has come is rule of the land. Like earlier when you talk about hosting the data out of India, now we have started talking about hosting it internally. Now people are talked about saying that fine, I would like to protect the data, I would like to protect the environment the way that I would like to have it, because there is a compliant regulators which are asking me to do so. So now in today's world where we are talking about hyperscale environment, where we are talking about cloud environment, where we are talking about everything as a service, so that dynamics is also changing. So even regulator is also trying to understand the actual pain point of the industry, and they are also framing a way out by which the industry can also grow in specifically in current scenario, along with keeping certain things in a view, saying that what is best to be happening in that scenario. Like I for an example, whenever there's a challenge, I always see that there's an opportunity. So now we talked about in terms of cloud environment where everything is on, availability is there as part of PaaS, SaaS, so on and so forth. There are certain, cloud service provider. They have come out with something called a banking cloud or financial cloud. What they are trying to say is, listen, I know that you need to be governed by, regulators. I know there is a data production which you need to take care of it. Instead of you taking care of it, leave it to us. We will create a network where we will do all the activity and you can start subscribing to those things. And we would be ensuring that regulators related all the compliance have been met, be it a SOC 2 or be it SOC 3, whatever you can call it. So all those things are happening and industry is going towards that. So I always believe that because of the restriction, there's a lot of opportunity which has come up, and now we can really see a paperless scenario. Earlier, when you talk about in terms of digitalization, first step of digitalization is digitization. Unless and until you do a digitization, there is no concept of digitalization. And in the pandemic, we are seeing all those things are happening, and it is by force. I can say it is by force, but it is happening for the better. That is what my view would be.
Absolutely, Rajesh. I think you mentioned a lot of points, but I think I like the way you put it across. Often regulators are looked at as, oh, somebody with the whip that they have. I don't think so. I think they have they created a guardrails, and the body creates all guardrails for industries to follow. But I think you also mentioned one thing, actually, it's organization responsibility to do the right thing for the customer with the data. I think it's so important. I think beautifully said. But you kept talking about data, and I just want to bring in Lekha into the conversation, who's, I know, kind of a specialist on a data-driven decisions and stuff like that. I wanted to ask you, Lekha, how leading organizations are already using some of the new approaches and technologies that not this panel talked about, but also beyond, using data-driven solutions.
Hi, Katie. Thank you for putting up this question to me. I think it's a very, very interesting question. Data has been the oil always. So for a few years, we are listening to this, but I think that's improving even further. And you have vast amount of data, but what will you do with that data if you do not have measurements in place? So measurements is something which actually drives every aspect of the data. And also for the CX, for customer experience also, it's the measurements which actually do count. So one of the major things for to arrive at various measurements is to tap all the digital channels which are available where the customer would interface with the client, with your company. So there would be multiple applications which a company would have for interfacing with your customers. We need to see that those tools are all together stitched in at the back end, at least, so that we are able to dig out a lot more information from the various tools and give out answers to the client, which is almost real time. So real time is the way. The voice of the customer is very important to be measured. There are multiple tools available to do the voice of customer through NLP algorithms, etc. So these are the main things which are driving towards the success of CX. Now, predictive analysis is also coming up in a big way to predict how the customers would be behaving further. So let me start with some of the very basic stuff for experience measurement, which is arrived at, which I think people would have heard these terms, and probably many of them use it also, which is like the Net Promoter Scores, the customer satisfaction scores which come out, the customer effort score which comes out. And one of the very new things which are here now is the customer lifetime value. So that helps you to derive the predict what would also come out further. So that's a new thing coming up still. And there are many tools which have started putting in these things as their measurements also. And of course, that's the normal ways would be to keep the churn rate and the retention rates. So those are also very, very, very important. So these analytic tools can only act on your data once your data is all integrated together. So the saying goes as, let no tool stand alone. Every tool should be together, should be integrated together. Any tool which is standing alone is giving out huge amount of data, but that data might not be usable across the entire company.
Sorry, Lekha, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I had just one very important aspect which I have been looking at was when I said integrating all the data together, there is a new term coming up, which is identity resolution approach. Now that is assimilating all your data together, identifying the person on various platforms, and then stitching it up together and being able to measure the entire journey of the customer. So those are some newer things which are coming out. The customer journey mapping has been followed in a few industries, and that's going to be very, very important to measure further. So getting onto the various type of personas of the customer, the various triggers which excite the customer, those are the important things which companies are looking to focus on. And all of that is driven through the platform of data.
Yeah, and beautifully said. I think there are a lot you said, but in a lot of nuggets that you threw. But I wanted to make sure that I kind of like what you said. Data is oil, but what are you going to do with the data? If you're not going to sort it, if you're not going to organize it or arrange it, if you're not going to find patterns, and if you're not going to use the outcomes of the data to drive future customer behaviors, then we are wasting all that there. But I think the measurements, again, customer effort score, yeah, it got to be keeping it low. Customer satisfaction need to go high. And when when you constantly evolve and look at these parameters and the indicators goes down, and what are you going to do with it? So it's important, because the way you said it, right? It's not about having a data. It's not about having the tools. Tools will not do anything by itself. What's the process that you put across, or that you define? What happens when a trigger or a certain threshold goes low or above? What are you going to do with it? I think that's where you brought in the unification of data, tying back to customer, and then probably predicting what the customer would do and what the customer would buy. You could all predict some of these patterns. So beautifully said, Lekha. Thank you. And I just want to mention it to all the audience who have joined. If you have a question, just put that into the chat window or a Q&A box. We will take live questions. And if you have a question targeted to a panel member, say the name so that I can direct that question to that particular panel member. We'll go across. Ramya, I want to, like I said, I will come back to you with a follow-up question. I think the way you narrated about technology solving in the B2B space, so I couldn't resist to, but not asking you that, how do you see the future of customer experience? Let's say 2022 is around the corner, 2025 in the B2B space.
B2B, okay. So very exciting. So the B2B customers, like B2C experiences, they are going to be asking for personalized experiences, very contextual experiences. They will show preferences for channels, right? I know about a decade and a half back, right? We had talked about how the Friday night or the Sunday night experience and the Monday morning experience, right? How there should not be a slip up between the two. And that's when the B2C organizations, started talking about multi-channel strategy and omni-channel experiences, etc. Right? So it's only a matter of time before corporates also start asking for similar experiences, and that's a reality that that we understood has been around for the past few years, and definitely accelerated with the pandemic, with the generational change that is coming in. With how social media, etc., is evolving, so we need to be ready for that. Customers have also started to have different personas, right? That we need to be first we need to recognize and we need to respect, and then we need to handle that. So a particular solution, let's assume an aftermarket solution that I put out, right? I cannot just say, hey, here is a portal link and this is a solution that fits for all. Because a larger customer, anybody from a CEO to a fleet manager to the head of finance would be consuming the solution. And they want to consume it in the way that deems fit for their role and the KPIs that they are looking out for. On the other end of the spectrum, like us, if you also have a retail segment, right, which is there. So it's B2B, but still there is a retail segment that you need to cater to. Their KPIs and their business model is vastly different. So you need to recognize that, provide solutions which are a lot more modular, easy to consume, carry it on your mobile, maybe vernacular language support needs to be there. So their needs are vastly different. So first we need to understand that, study the persona, kind of get ready for that. Second is we are seeing that we are able to have a digital footprint, more and more digital footprint of our customers. We are able to identify them, and we are able to even engage with them on platforms, like social media and other digital marketing channels. So it's not that they were not online before, but what I feel is that they now do not have a hesitation to interact with a brand online, right? So they are ready to, consume content, consume offers, consume content which is relevant for them in these kind of social spaces as well. So that's something that you have to leverage, understand where your customers are and kind of go there, right? Meet their needs there, meet them where they are at. And hence all of this, kind of put together, if you see it, it's nothing that it boils down to you having a proper multi-channel strategy in place. So we have to kind of be ready for that. What that means is that the enterprise has to be ready. I know Sudha talked a little bit about it, but definitely, for you to provide an experience for a changing needs of the B2B customer, your organization systems and process has to be ready. So this is a program that we call as Connected Enterprise at GMMCO, and we run this program, which is nothing but process digitalization. But what we do as part of this programs is we question the status quo of the process itself, right? Does this meet the changing needs, right? Are there optimization opportunities? Are there automation opportunities? What else can we do intelligently? Smart, intelligent, recommendations, prediction. All of this is something that comes together when we run our digitalization projects. The second thing that as an enterprise we have to do to meet the changing needs is technically think through from an enterprise architecture perspective and see if you have a good API strategy in place, right? You can call it API, microservices, whatever it might be. Sit down with the enterprise architect, have this in place, because you can never deliver a world-class omni-channel experience if you have not gone through a data cleansing, single source of data, holistic API strategy. If it's not in place, it's not going to be as seamless as you want it to be. So in our case, we went out with a cloud-first, mobile-first strategy about 3.5 years back. That's now helping us to meet with the changing demands of the B2B segment. So quickly, just to summarize it, right, I would first say acknowledge that there are various customer personas within the B2B segment. It's not a single persona anymore, right? Understand where they are at, what are their channel preferences, meet them where they are, right? And which means that your enterprise must be ready operationally as well as technically to meet this change. See, for me, CX, right, is a beautiful culmination of us meeting the needs of the customer, but us also being to achieve this nirvana state where they perceive the brand as we want them to perceive. And for that, if the connected enterprise, is ready, is there, right, then the changing needs of the customer can very well be met.
Excellent. I think, while I've asked you to B2B space, but the way you narrated, I think meet the customers where they are, especially in those businesses who deal with B2B, but not deal with direct C. I think the lines are getting blurred. I see that, it's important for end consumer to be engaged and in whatever way that they can. And if you're in a CPG business, it doesn't matter whether you're in heavy equipment, it doesn't matter which business that you're in. End of the day, the consumer need to have a voice heard. And looks like that's been the core thing. And second thing, which I really like, earlier 2-3 years ago, you talked about mobile first, cloud first. I think slowly evolving into digital first, which seems to be the mantra today. Thank you, Ramya, for those. Thomas, I want to ask you this question about being a CDO or Chief Digital Officer that you are currently. There is a lot of emphasis, there are conversations that we did today about being agile, IT spend going up on CX and everything else. Do you think it's sustainable, or do you think it's just a reaction to pandemic and hopefully not, and slowly the slowdown of the investment would come in and CX in 2022 and going forward?
Thanks, Katie, for that question. And a lot of the panelists spoke about it. Digital is the new mantra. So if you're not on it, you're not going to survive. We as an organization wanted to move at 100x speed, and we very early realized the only way to do that is to ensure that the digital is embedded into every user in the organization. And for that, what we did internally was to create a framework, which is all about a digital engine, which is all about finding the right problem, and we have a user centricity movement which we've started internally, and Ramya alluded to it in terms of being where your customer or consumer is, right? And that's where you will find the real problem. Yeah. And the next part is how do you solve that problem? Yeah. And Sudha mentioned about a lot of AI, ML, data models. So we use a lot of them to really solve that problem once we identify. And the third part is, how do we automate? Once we solve for it, it can't be manually driven. So how do we automate that solution that we found? Once we do all these three things, we go back to finding the next problem. Yeah. So that's the digital engine that we put in place in our organization. Coming back to your investment question, in the last 1.5 years or so, if you look at forecast accuracy of organizations, it's gone down from close to 95% to about 70-75%, and that's largely due to the disruption this pandemic has created. And for some it's worked really well, where the growth trajectory has been 70-80%, and for the others it's adversely impacted. But anyways, that's impacted in a big way. But if I were to look at a lot of organizations, for which the growth has been extremely high, they are now looking at a new benchmark of consumer demand or customer demand. And this benchmark is going to continue and sustain. So a lot of organizations are now looking at how do you augment capacity, how do you augment supply chain constraints, to remove supply chain constraints and do investments. So to your question, yes, I think it's a very good time. A lot of organizations are gearing up for all those investments across supply chain, across route to market, and of course digital, because that's going to be the engine which is going to drive all of this growth.
So if I get to understand that the investments will not slow down, I think it's only to accelerate further, to further strengthen some of the signals that you're seeing it, like a forecast accuracy. Nobody would have anticipated the kind of demand, or maybe no demand, what pandemic has really created, right? So thank you for leading that, actually, Thomas. Sudha, I promised I wanted to come back to you asking this question about what technologies would define, let's say, a workplace in 2023 or 2025, future technology. I would say if the workplace of future need to be defined, what it comprises of technologies.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking that question, Katie. I will tell you what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Again, I'll go back to my previous thought process. There are two parts. Digital, again, I'll pick Thomas here. He mentioned that, right? Transformation, which continue to stay. And what it means for tech players for us is how do we kind of operate at scale, and based on what capabilities you're providing, right? And that differs based on the enterprise needs. So that's going to stay. So what is going to be critical for us is, while digitization is happening, a lot more digital innovation is you need to expect. Artificial intelligence, we will understand that better, its use cases, applying its capabilities, and then you have your Internet of Things, how you're able to make that connections between different different things, and you're able to use that effectively. Everything is going to happen, right? And it's going to happen much better in a larger scale. But the bottom line also is humans, people, right? So that's what I was talking about, tying back to my previous point. The core is human connectivity, right? End of any decade, right? Anytime you talk about 2025, talk about 2030, humans will still be humans, right? So we will have our greed, our generosity, our love and hate, truth and lies. That's going to exist in some proportions. So what these innovations mean to us, like and I would say as a bottom line would be, how do we have these social media being more responsible, right? And Rajesh talked about, data protection. So for me as a human, I have these innovation, I have these digital platforms. What does privacy issue mean to me, right? What are the actions that these workplaces are taking to ensure my privacy is stay intact? Misinformation, that's a big thing now, right? So I talked again, tying back to the point I said, like as a customer, I would like to have information as quickly as possible, but accurately as well, right? And there is so much concerns with accuracy of information that's encountered online, and we all know that, right? So how does these enterprises going to ensure that part is going to be an interesting. See, one thing that will remain, and I will connect back to the digital and human, right, is going to be social connectivity. There's going to be a number of innovations that will help connect people, bring them together for a common purpose. Pandemic showed us how do we learn from, healthier living, right? I've seen a lot of innovation coming up in terms of how do we address physical and mental health, right? In my mind, I've attended so many conferences. I never thought like I will speak to the doctor on a, in like over a Zoom. But that has happened. I don't think doctors themselves really thought that they will really look at the patients, over a Zoom. That changed mental health. People started talking about how I'm going through certain issues and how have I come out of it, and people are learning from each other. So healthier living, social connectivity, the social, responsible social media, the way I mentioned. I think education, we all are evolving around the societal changes, right? Environmental issues. So this is just, I think the technology, to me, it becomes a tool, right? Digital is going to continue to run, they continue to transform. AI is learning. We will understand more capabilities. But as I said, human is the core. So we need to continue to understand that and see how we can make that very responsible and how we can connect that together.
Brilliant, Sudha. I think it's so many things that you dropped. I have to bring in Lekha to weigh in some of those. Lekha, if I have to get into this conversation, I think we talked about it, and maybe let me give a reference point. Zendesk as a company, we also do a lot of research about, and engage third party to do a research about customer experience trends, and the top 3 areas where the companies are increasing investments around offering multiple channels. I think we talked about that. Improving information security, I think data privacy and those things that we talked about, and agile technologies. I think being agile is a core mantra of this conversation today. But rather interestingly, AI and machine learning have come relatively lower on the list. When you look at the top 3 investment areas, AI did not come up there. In fact, roughly about 60% indicated increasing investment in that area, but still it's lower. If you look at this trend, maybe I want to tie back to what Sudha talked about. Or artificial intelligence technology is still a few years away, making a significant impact to what we do and the livelihood of everybody. And is it an optimal combination of human intelligence? I think Sudha talked about it, and artificial intelligence. How do you get this right? There are, I think the balance is so important. You can't put technology to solve everything, because human empathy, intelligence is still important. But how do you strike a balance?
Yeah, so the first thing on the AI technologies being a few years away. So AI has been existing for a very long time, but it is a very custom built thing which is made. It's made for a particular purpose, and that purpose is the one which drives its success. We can have probably doing it for a particular side of some image analysis being used for a particular use case. It doesn't mean that same thing can be applied for all of the others. It has to be that the AI technologies have to be trained, and that training needs a lot of human intervention. It relies a lot on the human arriving at training the AI engines to identify the end results. It could be supervised learning, it could be semi-supervised learning, and those are the ways where the AI engines are being made and getting adopted. The second aspect, so it's not that you pick up one tool and you can apply it at any industry at any place without giving it specific training data. So if we want to identify brands across, if we want to capture, let's say from the market, from a store, we want to capture all the items displayed in the store, we could do it through image analysis. But what comes out is, can you just pick it up and start working on it through a AI engine which has already been built? Probably no, because you need to give in all the feeds of the brands which are existing. And for one image, you need to give n number of images across. Probably to arrive at one analysis, there would be something like thousands of images which would be required to identify the actual result. So the human intervention doesn't get removed, and hence this threat or this threat which is around that jobs will be lost because of AI, that is absolutely wrong. People will evolve to actually do a lot more better things, and that's what happened when technology took over. Also, there was a big threat of my job getting lost in probably manufacturing companies also, that if this particular thing gets automated, I would probably lose my job. But it is not that at all. It is the human intelligence is evolving, and it evolves further to adapt more, so that the technology gets technology does the mundane job, and you do some more intelligent jobs to actually see how it works. And those are the things which are happening in the industry now. There are many products which are coming out also, which are have an inbuilt of AI engines in it. Some of the cloud providers are providing many of these backends which are there with just taking an example of image analysis, they are giving a lot of images at the backend to identify the brand itself. So, but then that lexicon which is being built at the backend, that's also a huge effort which they have taken, and that's how it is coming out of the market. So these technologies are evolving, and they will keep evolving. By the next few years, they are coming to mainstream already, but in very small ways, in particular ways, it will become a bigger mainstream in future as such, when the products start integrating them together.
Absolutely. I think if I understand from even our own experience, the smartest use of technology is when you could put in a business case or a scenario where technology doesn't have an answer, and then you smoothly hand over to a human being to transition. So the customer feels that they're getting the help that is required, like mundane tasks, maybe, simple example of bank. Hey, your bank branch open till what time today? Maybe the machine learning and AI bot can give an answer there. It's 4 o'clock. Can I come by and talk to your branch manager? Damn, how does the bot knows the branch manager in or not? Maybe the human need to answer, or maybe the branch manager on holiday. Maybe they're not integrated. Maybe that's where you smoothly transition to human being and let a human being go ahead and answer and use that intelligence. But if you come at by 4 o'clock, probably they're not. Come by 2:30, maybe you can meet the person or something of the nature. So I'm just saying, the smartest companies who knows how to use the technology for mundane jobs that you mentioned, at the same time they smoothly transition to human, where more intelligent question or more trickier question is asked, or you need to empathize with customers, things like credit card loss. And I'm just talk about this example all the time. Imagine you put a bot as a use case. If you're a banker, and I'm as a person who lost credit card and I'm interacting with bot, already anxiety is built that my credit card lost. I want to talk to somebody and block the credit card. I don't want to talk to bots, and because I'm looking for empathy at that point of time. I want somebody to empathize with my situation. I think it's very important. I think we got to strike the balance. Beautifully said, Lekha. Rajesh, maybe I'll ask you the last question for the panel, because I'm getting pinged that our time is getting almost close. Especially considering that we evolved into digital first world, like Ramya alluded into. How did this impact, let's say, a BFSI industry? Again, I'm going to pick you as a expertise for BFSI industry, because we have large set of audience and the world looking at the BFS industry. It's the oldest industry, if you want to call it as. And I wanted to know how it's impacted, and also how it changed the customer behavior. And these sets, are they driving future revenue growth for the industry?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. It's a really beautiful question. So I will answer it in a two-part. First part is like till today, IT has been seen as a support function earlier. Then they said that IT is a driving business. Now I will call IT itself to be a business. So when I say IT itself to a business, and IT by name itself like a integrated technology, unless and until you have the technology which is integrated in all nature at the group level or at that parent level, you will not be able to leverage that the benefit to other aspect of it. So now when I talk about in terms of BFSI, so I see CX into two parts. One part CX, which is to enable a business or drive a business or to move forward in terms of expansion. Second CX is to the end customer, what the value, what he is going to get it. So if I talk about from an endpoint customer's perspective, then there is a lot of things which is already happening, be it in terms of AI, ML, or it's a mobile banking, or it can be even in terms of eKYCs, everything where earlier customer used to rush to the bank or maybe to a financial institute to do certain things. Now everything is been done by a click of a button at its own convenience. That is the one part to look into. Second part is if I talk about from a driving the business, so the technology is also helping the business to grow in terms of to giving more opportunity to expand, like in terms of reduction of cost. I do agree, like, in terms of AI, ML, and the new technology might not take away the job, but definitely the performance or in terms of the overall action towards the, running the business has improved drastically. So that anyway is trying to help us in terms of getting into that part. I fully agree to Sudha as well as, Lekha's view, saying that when you talk about data, so the data is in abundance. What is required is to take out the noise from a data and to get the information out of it. And that can be possible only when you actually confirm the source from where you are getting the data to do an interconnected scenario with a collaboration. So today, like, if I talk about an activity which is repetitive in nature, and if we do it in a collaborative way across organization, not only that increase in terms of productivity will go up, but also there's a lot of other wastage can also be brought down significantly. Coming back to Lekha's discussion when she talked about AI, currently we are having a weak AI. So if I talk about the progression of AI, so it is from a weak, general to super. So still the AI, when I talk about it, is it requires a human intervention. It requires a lot of training. It requires a lot of data to nurture, to say what step it needs to be taken into a next level when you do a modulation or creating a different module. So it is very important for an organization to identify the right set of resource, right set of data, and also right set of use case to create a platform to take the benefit out of AI, or be it AI, be it ML, be it NLP, or also we have started hearing about the blockchain. So now blockchain technology is a bit far in terms of getting adapted in a financial industry, but that day is not very far, because when you talk about immutable ledger sort of scenario, which is more transparent and which is more decentralized sort of scenario, which is more trusted. So things are moving towards that direction. So in my view, BFSI as well as the financial industry is going to gain a lot of benefit if this technologies is being adapted in a collaborative way, keeping the view exactly what is the data we are talking about, what is the information I need to take out, and what is the interconnection which I would like to have it from a different, not only internal to organization, but to external also. Like for an example, if I talk about fraud, prevention or fraud detection. So even today, like I know for sure, like a lot of regulators are emphasizing in moving towards such technology, which can give a fair idea for any organization to latch onto it and to have more seamless experience when you talk about running the business. The same time, when those things have been leveraged to a customer, the customer is also, happy. For an example, today, like those days where I still remember, when I have to give KYC to the same bank for a multiple divisions. Like for an example, if I have a loan, I have to give a KYC. If I have a card, I have to give a KYC. If I have a savings account, I have to give a KYC. So my question is, why do I need to do that? Even though it's a one umbrella, but if I'm talking to a 4person, and if you happen to talk to the 5th person, he will say, boss, you're talking to me. I don't know what happened to the rest 3. Because, unless until person enters the data in a systematic way, things are not happening in, proper thing. But in case if those data are being consolidated at a single point, and in case if that is enriched, so the customer experience is also going to increase in terms of also to maintaining the security and the compliance regulatory aspect, which has been required from any governing body. So that is what my view would be on this.
Thank you, Rajesh. I think as a summary, first of all, I want to thank you all of you for interesting views. As a summary, what I gather, Rajesh, you touched upon how financial institutions, you need to do a multiple KYCs, and the customer feels that, why am I doing all of that instead of just giving one? I think the businesses and the processes were business centric earlier. I think thanks to pandemic, I think every business has evolved into customer centric. Some of the newer set of financial institutions are putting customer in the center and trying to design the process rather than trying to create a business process and then put customer and other parties. So that clearly is emerged. Second, I like what Ramya talked about. You get to customer where they are, and the only way that you can do it, doesn't matter whether a B2C or a B2B or a B2B2C, you just need to have a constant ear for customer. Use a technology to go disrupt. It's honestly on us. Don't wait for somebody else tell you. Pandemic did not tell us in advance that it's coming, right? So it came as, and we got to be ready with all those scenarios. I really like what Sudha talked about. Happy employees, about drive happy customers. You got to think about customers as the epicenter of driving your change, because they can be your brand ambassador to drive it. Lekha talked about data and how could you drive outcomes, and data is good for nothing if you're not going to do anything about it. So draw the outcomes that it can create a business impact. More importantly, the 3 pillars that Thomas talked about, comfort, convenience, and customization, which are core pillars of CX. But eventually looks like all of the panelists were clearly alluding into, I think we arrived into experience economy. I think we talked about, subscription world. So if you look at, this is a subscription world that we're going to live in a technology, and the economy that really runs is experience. It changes. And the people who always expect digital first virtual everyday world. I want to thank all the audience who have joined us today for this great panel. I want to thank individually Ramya, Thomas, Rajesh, Lekha, Sudha. Really appreciate your time today. It's been a real pleasure to be part of this panel. Kavya, over to you.